All right, so it says, please use the Using Quotes handout and the sample source paragraph handout as a model. So it's telling you in the assignment what you're supposed to be using for a model. So I'm going to go over those handouts today in class, but the models are there for you, and there's an extra tutorial there for you. Okay, there's Owen. We're going to, good morning, how are you? All right, and so we're going to use, we're going to write a source paragraph using 3 short quotes from one of the 2 articles I provided in week 6. Okay, remember, we're building things. Remember I said that when you did that discussion board where you grabbed the 3 quotes and you told me why you had chosen them? We're using that, okay? So you can go back to that discussion board and grab the work you did there and build from it, okay? And so we're taking the work that we did there and we're building on it. Okay, so choosing one of those, just like you did for the discussion board, we're going to grab 3 quotes and we're going to put them, now we're going to put them in a paragraph. We're going to learn today what that paragraph is going to look like and how to take what we did in weeks 6 or 7 in discussion board and then turn it into a paragraph. So it says, this paragraph will be one of 4 source paragraphs in your essay. So are you using one of the articles that you found last week? No, because I'm going to use this week to check those and make sure they're good, and then we'll write about them. Okay, does that make sense? You also need a week to read them and make sure they're good, and then if they're not, to replace them with something that's better, right? So we're kind of going back and forth between looking at sources that I provide and the ones you provide. Yes, ma'am, question? That's right. The 2 that we worked with in week 6 that I provided, that you chose quotes from in discussion board. Remember we did that? That's the assignment we're using. So it even reminds you here in the assignment, it says you just did a lot of the legwork for this in last week's discussion board. Use those 3 quotes and tidy up those explanations and start from there. And then add your topic sentence, your source introductions, your quote integration phrases, and make sure you have your citations, okay? So we're gonna, that all probably sounds like French to you right now. I'm gonna make sure you know what those are today. And that's our goal for today, is to make sure you know how to take those quotes and explanations that you did in discussion board and turn them into a paragraph. Are we ready to look at that? Okay, so the next thing we're gonna look at together is these handouts. The first handout I'm going to open are these 2, the Using Quotes and Works Cited Lists handouts. Right, so the first one we're going to open and the one we're going to work with most today is this first one called Using Quotes. And we're going to open this document right now and take a look at it. Okay, and this tells us a pattern for how to use a source anytime any paper uses any source. So y'all, let's talk about that for a second. I want eyes and ears on this. If you use a dictionary, you go through these steps. If you use a quote from a famous person, you use these steps. If you are looking something up for your psychology class, you use these steps, okay? Anytime you have to read something in order to write about it, you use these steps, okay? Even if your teacher says sources are not required here, if you use one, use these steps. Does that make sense? So I was working with a student from a community college up in New England who's a friend of the family, and her teacher had said, well, you don't need to use sources. Well, she had used sources, but because her teacher had said you don't need to use sources, she just didn't cite them. And what conversation did they have to have about that? Right, she plagiarized, right? And she got accused of plagiarism. She was all freaked out, and she said, but he said we didn't have to use sources. I said, right, but you did. And if you use them, you have to go through these steps every single time, okay? Whether it's a tiny little piece or a big thing, always use these steps. Yes, every time. Okay, so the steps are, number one, somebody tell me the first step. I'm gonna make it a little bigger down here. I'm gonna make that bigger so we can read it a little better. Let's see, Cyrus, can you read step 1 to us? Fantastic. So we start with a topic sentence that's about your ideas, that's about your thesis that you're taking, right? And it's just like a topic sentence for the body paragraphs you wrote for the last essay, right? So we're not doing anything new there. You know how to write a topic sentence, yes? It's got to have keywords from the thesis or the prompt. It's got to have a transitional phrase in it, and it's got to tell us exactly what the paragraph will be about. And that does not mean it's going to tell us what source it is, because that's not what the paragraph is about. The paragraph is about whatever idea that source supports, right? So we're using only ideas here. So is there any source mentioned in your topic sentence? No, it's just a regular topic sentence. This is where you make sure that you, as the author of this paper, are number one and are the star of the show, right? Because this is your argument, not a book report, right? You are making an argument. The authors are just there to back up you. They're your backup, right? So you have to be star of the show with this topic sentence. All right, let's see. Tushara, can you read number 2 for us? Okay, so source introduction, give context for the quote, making sure the reader knows what piece you refer to, who wrote it, and what's going on around the quote you plan to use. There are 3 sentences minimum for step 2. I want you to write down what they are. Okay, or take notes in your computer, right? Or on your phone, but I want you to make these notes. There are 3 sentences required for this. Sentence number 1 tells me who the author is. Sentence number 2 tells me the title of the article. Do you have to do these in order, or could you do the title first? You could do the title first. It doesn't matter what order they go in. And then the third sentence tells me in your own words what the article argues or what it's about. Okay? This is where it's, let's say you were doing one of those NPR audio files and it's an interview. This is where you would tell me the title of it, and you would tell me who the interviewer was and who was talking to each other. And then you'd tell me it was an interview, right? So it's an interview from this show run by this guy, and they're talking about this, right? So just a couple of sentences explaining your source. Who wrote it or who recorded it, right? Maybe even where it comes from. Like if you have an article from the New York Times that doesn't have an author, tell me instead that it's from the New York Times. Okay, and that's okay. You might have to substitute a periodical title for an author title if there isn't an author title, and that's okay. But 3 sentences. Have we quoted yet? No.
What was the second one?
Okay, so we need 3 things. You need to tell me the author, the title, and a summary. Author, title, summary. Why 3 separate sentences? Because there's 3 separate pieces of information, right? And remember, a paragraph is like a hamburger. And if you have a big hamburger, you need to take more bites, not bigger bites. That's gross, right? So when you have a lot of information to get across, when you have 3 pieces of information to get across, use 3 sentences. What happens is students will try to run them all together and end up with run-ons or sentences where the grammar has gotten away from you, right? So later, as we get better at it, like in 102, I'll show you how to start putting them together into one sentence that tells me the author and the title together, but not yet. Right now, I want one title, one sentence for the author, one sentence for the title, and one sentence of summary. So you got 4 sentences in this paragraph already. These paragraphs are going to be kind of long, aren't they? That's okay. Be patient with it. It's going to help your development, make your development for this essay really easy. Okay? All right. It says, note, it may take more than one sentence and should not be in the same sentence as the quote itself. The worst thing I used to see in my UAB students when I taught there is they would say, in an article by Jack Stone called The New Ice Age, he says, comma, quote. Woo. But the thing is, they would get it wrong. They would tangle up the grammar and the titles would be really long and they'd still be trying to stuff it all into one sentence. And it just doesn't work that way. And I was always on their cases to take those jobs apart, right? Don't quote and introduce at the same time. Take your time to introduce your source. This is where you show us that it's a good source, right? This is where you prove to your reader that this is a source worth talking about, okay? So take a minute to establish the authority of your source. All right, Owen, tell me step 3. Your audio is cutting out. I'm going to switch over to Gavin. Hey, Gavin, can you help out? His audio is being weird on him. That's not your fault, Owen.
Yeah. Use your quote as part of a complete sentence.
Okay, so use your quote as part of a complete sentence. So we have what we call, and I want you to write this down, quote integration phrases. Quote integration phrases, and we're going to do some practicing with those today. Let's see, Lamar, can you tell me in the example what the quote integration phrase is? Can you figure that out? Yes, he contends that. That is the quote integration phrase, okay? And we're going to use something like that as a ramp up into every quote. What are some other ones that you know you can use? We've seen these before. What are some other ones? Super easy ones. She says, right? He argues. Right. Okay. So we're gonna practice those. We're gonna make a little. There's Jackson. We're gonna make a little bank of them that we can use a little later in class. But you always have to have one of these. Don't start so that's one of the things to add to the quotes you had. In discussion board, I didn't make you do a he says, comma, quote. We're going to always do a he says, comma, quote, or the author argues, comma, quote, or the article points out, comma, quote. And we'll get a bank of those and you can choose from them, but we're always, always, always going to use one. Okay? So that's one thing that you'll add to the quotes you chose last week. Okay. And then we have the next job, which is to provide an in-text citation. Now, the in-text citation is small. It's not where we put in the author and the title and the page numbers and all that stuff. We just use a page or a paragraph number. So, Logan, can you read us step 4? All right, so provide an in-text citation at the end of the sentence in which your quote appears. So if your sentence keeps going at the end of your quote, the citation goes at the end of the sentence, not at the end of the quote. We don't want the citation to interrupt your thinking. Okay, so we put it at the end of the sentence. Y'all are going to be using this. See where it says paragraph 6, because all of you are going to be using sources without the original pagination, because that's what happens when you get it through the database. Okay, so none of you will be reading the actual New York Times, right? So you'll be reading something that was typed up and given to the database from the New York Times. So you don't have the original pagination, so you will always be using paragraph number. Now, Cyrus, you had a question over the weekend about how to figure out paragraph number in one of your sources. And part of what's going on this week is I'm going to be evaluating those sources and seeing if they are good, strong sources. And that one might be, in which case I'll help you figure out the paragraphs. And it might not be, in which case I'll send you to find a different one. Okay? Okay. Fantastic. But we're going to use this citation format, which just says lowercase par period space 6. And it's in parentheses at the end of your sentence. And we're going to take a look at those too. Notice this is a page number because it doesn't have par in front of it. It doesn't have line in front of it like it would if we were doing poems. If you go to 102, keep this handout because we use it in 102 and my students use the line numbers in our poetry unit. Right, so this is a handout to use in 102 or any other class that makes you use sources. Okay, they'll all follow this pattern. Okay, and then after each quote, an analysis is needed. And this is why I had you explain why you chose the quote. And we're going to have to work with those a little bit. Yes, ma'am. One more time. Yes, ma'am. This is for one paragraph. It is a lot, isn't it? Oh, more than that. Take a breath. We're going to do these a few at a time. This week we're doing one. Okay? That's why I'm not sending you home to do the research paper in one chunk like some classes do. It doesn't work out well. Yeah? So we're doing this a piece at a time so that you know how to do this. Yeah? And we're doing just this one source paragraph and then I'll check it and then we'll do the other ones. Okay? And then we'll put it all together with the rest of the essay. It's a lot, right? It's a lot. But remember, you've already chosen your quotes and you've already explained why you think they're important. So you've done some of this analysis already, right? Okay. Good. So let's not panic. You've already done maybe half of this paragraph already. We just need to add some to make sure the citations are in the right format. All right. So how are we doing on this? Okay. So there are some other things on this handout we're going to take a look at. There are some common sense reminders here, and these are not to be skipped. Long quotes of more than 4 lines require block quote format, which is different than what I've described above. So don't use them in this essay, please. Keep your quotes shorter than 4 lines of typing. It's good for you, okay? Avoid long quotes by using summary and paraphrase and by analyzing smaller pieces at a time, okay? Avoid using numbers in place of giving context. I have a few students who will say in line 8 of the poem, this, the poet says this. And I suppose technically you can do that, but it's not very interesting. You can say at the beginning of the poem instead, and then just put your citation at the end, right? So because numbers don't make for interesting reading, okay? Keeping your source introduction separate from your quote integration will help you avoid run-ons and other grammatical errors when trying to match the quote grammar to your own. It's easiest if you just do a really short, he says, comma, quote, or the article says, comma, quote, and just keep it simple, okay? All right, so you have a sample source paragraph here that's labeled. So the number 1 is the topic sentence, and that was job number 1. And then where it says number 2 a couple of times, that's my source introduction. That was job 2. And where it says number 3, that's the 3rd job, right? And then where it says number 4, that's my 4th job. And then I go back to job 3 and back to job 4, and then I have my 5th job of analysis. So it goes back and forth. Now this paragraph model is not quite as easy to follow as the paragraph model that's in Blackboard that says source paragraph. So I'm going to close out of that. Again, that handout was in using quotes and works cited lists. That's where that handout was that we were just going over. Now we're going to go over the sample source paragraph handout. Okay, so I'm going to open this one, and we're going to take a look at this one, and then we're going to build one together. Okay, all right. I know it's kind of a lot. Don't get overwhelmed. You've done a chunk of this already. Okay, so you have a reminder of what all the jobs are, but then I've taken a sample paragraph and I've color coded it for you by job. Okay, I'm gonna make it a little bigger. Now, this is a big paragraph, is it not? Yeah, this is a big paragraph, but guess what? College. This is what college paragraphs look like. There is one source in this paragraph. How many sources are in this paragraph? One. Why am I asking you to do just one source in each of your source paragraphs? So you have 4 sources in this essay, and you'll write one paragraph for each of them. Why? Because there are so many jobs involved in doing it right that if you try to get 2 sources into one paragraph, you're not doing one of those jobs properly. I guarantee it. Okay, you're not introducing the source properly, or you're not quoting it enough, or whatever. Okay, so as a rule of thumb, when you're writing an essay that requires research, even if it's for psych or sociology or history, one source and explore it thoroughly in its own paragraph. Okay? Okay. That way you introduce it with the author. Right. So we're going to read this together. Who wants to read the topic sentence, which is in black? Let's have Joshua do that. Okay, so sometimes the death of a parent exposed. Do we have an author's name in there, or a periodical title, or anything like that? No, it's just the ideas of the essay. It lets you know what the essay is about. What is this essay about? Yeah, parents and children and generational stuff. And so we know that because of that topic sentence. Okay, this paragraph is going to be about how the death of a parent makes a kid realize they didn't know their parent very well sometimes. Okay, all right. The next 1, 2, 3, 4 sentences are just introducing the story or article that we're talking about here. Okay, so Gavin, read us the one that introduces the author's name.
James Baldwin was an African-American author writing in the pre-civil rights era in the United States.
Great.
He wrote an essay called Notes from the Native Son, reflecting on the death of his father. Baldwin tells us that his father was a difficult man, and his essay talks a lot about his father's effect on him. He thinks that his father's death changed his path in important ways.
Okay, so this section does 3 things. It tells me who's the author. Who's the author here? James Baldwin. Good. And what did he write that we're going to be looking at? Notes from a Native Son. And what's it about? His difficult father and what happened when he died. Okay, right. So summary is what you can say about an article after you read it without looking at it. Okay, so if you've read one of your articles for your research essay and you want to do the introductory summary sentences, get your author in there, use that to get your author sentence in there. You probably won't know background about the author. You can just say, I found an article by Mary Jones, period. It's okay if this sentence is a simple one, okay? You don't have to try to look up information about the person who wrote the article for Newsweek. You don't have to do that. You could say Mary Jones wrote an article for CNN Wire. I like that. That works out okay. Okay. You could just say Mary James wrote an article about the Confederate monuments. It was called blah, 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 right? and just keep them in separate sentences. All right.
So
And then
you want us to go into detail how you explained who the guy is in ours too, as well?
no, you probably won't be able to. You probably won't know very much about the authors. You might add like what periodical they wrote for, like CNN Wire, but you're not going to be able to look up information on every person who writes for CNN. It's not realistic. Yeah. Okay. All right. And then we have a quote. All right. So Tallulah, can you tell me that green part for me? And where did that come from in the art in Notes from a Native Son? It came from paragraph 2. Fantastic. How do you know that? There's a citation. Fantastic. What ends first, the sentence or the quote? The quote ends. Is the citation part of the sentence? Yes, because the period is after it. Is the citation part of the quote? No, because the quotes end before the citation. So take a look at the punctuation here. It goes end quotation, space, parentheses, PAR, period, space, 2, parentheses, period. And yours is going to look that way. The mistakes I see here is that some people will put the quotation marks on the other side of the citation. That's not where they go. They go at the end of the quote. Baldwin did not write paragraph 2 at the end of that sentence, right? The other mistake I see is that they'll put the period that Baldwin had in there and then another one at the end of the citation, and you don't. You just take the period that's here and you move it over here. Does that make sense? Okay, good. What if it's a question mark here? You just move the question mark over to the other side of the citation. It looks really weird, but I promise that's how you do it. And it's weird. What if it's an exclamation point? You just move it over to the other side of the citation. Okay. And then we have analysis, right? So the analysis, Lorian, can you read the purple analysis for us? Okay, great. So here, we're not just saying what it means, right? And I don't want you to paraphrase your quote. Paraphrasing means saying it again in your own words. So instead of saying this, you put your quote in and then you say this means, and you say the same thing again in your own words. That's not analysis, right? That's saying it over again. And you don't need to, because I'm a really, really good reader. And I understood the quote the first time. What I don't understand is what you want me to see in it. Okay, I don't know why you think it's important. Okay, and that's what an analysis is. So in the analysis, it's I chose it because, but we're going to get rid of the I chose it because and just use the rest of that sentence. This quote shows that we're sick of it, or this show, I agree that this is a problem, or, right? So we're taking out a little bit of the I think, I feel, and just stating it with a little more confidence why we chose it. Does that make sense? We just kind of want to work with some confidence. If you're struggling with that skill, that's why we have this assignment. I'll give you an example of how yours looks and how we could change it, and then you can change the other two using that model. Okay? All right. The orange is a paraphrase. It's extra. I need you to quote 3 times instead of quote twice, paraphrase once. I want you to use all 3 quotes in your paragraph. Okay? But if you ever do want to paraphrase, I want you to have a model for it, which is that if any of the words are really close to what the author said, you still have to tell us what paragraph it comes from, and you still have to have a little phrase like he says, so that it's not me saying that he didn't know how old his father was. He's saying it. Does that make sense? Because I didn't know that before I read it. And if I didn't know it before I read it, I've got to attribute it to James Baldwin and say what paragraph I learned it in. Okay? Yes, ma'am. Just quote them for now. Okay, we can work on paraphrasing a little bit in the next ones if you want to paraphrase something from the articles you choose. Right now, I want us to practice the quoting. Okay? All right. Okay, I'm going to let you work with this model a little bit more at home. Right now, what we're going to do is build our own. Okay? And what we're going to do is we're actually going to go to the discussion board and grab some 3 quotes, okay? And I'm going to do it from, let's see, discussion. Should be week 7. No, week 6. Okay, it's from our week 6 discussion. I don't want to give one person too much help. So what we're going to do here, look. All right. Oh, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to be really mean. Bear with me one. All right, so I'm just going to take what this person did in discussion board, and you can do this too. You can take what you did in discussion board. Please don't take what somebody else did in discussion board. That's a form of plagiarism. Definitely don't do that. And you can open up a Word document, and you can start with that. You can put them in. God bless, copy and paste. You've got something to get started with. But this is not a source paragraph. So what the first thing we need to do is take a look and says some statues have been relocated to museums while others were destroyed. Monuments should be put away. That history can't be a sword. Even empty pedestals offer important lessons. Okay, so this person is for removing the monuments. And this article is talking about how empty pedestals can be good, right? We need to know that to get our topic sentence. So our topic sentence says monuments, woo, not that at all. Okay, there we go. What is going on? Monuments, not bold either. All right, so just this person's point of view is that we don't need the reminders of a negative history, right? They're trying to get rid of them. She can also follow that up and say some places have already started removing them. So take a sentence or two to put your own ideas first, okay? Which article did this come from? Can you tell? You got to think. Which article did this come from? Which article is for removal? Great. Okay, so let's get to that. And remember, you can go to week 6. I know this is a lot of kind of shuffling around, but you can do the shuffling around and it's okay. All right, so let's go here to week 6. For real, go to week 6. And if you did your job in discussion board, it'll tell you what paragraph to find it in, right? So why I changed my mind. All right, so let's get back to our discussion board and copy paste. It says this is from paragraph 5. So let's look at paragraph 5 and see if it's there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Some statues have been relocated. Okay, good. So we have to look for our sentence telling about who the author is. Okay, who wrote this? Kevin Levine. Okay, so in this paragraph, we just write, there was an article about this by Kevin M. Levine. Is that enough, or do I need to look up stuff about him? That's good. All right, keep it simple, right? You don't need to, it's already overwhelming. Don't make it harder than it needs to be. Keep it simple, it's okay. All right, what was the article called? And then let's get back here. And we go, why I changed my mind about Confederate monuments. So, all right, let's get that in. And we're going to get it in here. It was called, quote, why I, capital C, changed my mind about Confederate monuments. Is that enough? Yes. What was the article about? Levine argues what? You tell me. You read the article. Don't look at it. Just tell me what it was, what he said. There we go. Now, Levine tells us why he changed his mind after thinking about other people's point of view on the monuments, right? And then maybe a little bit of context to get us ready for this. He points out that some are already gone and nobody seems to miss them. He points out, comma, quote. Now, is this period in the right place? Nope, we're going to get rid of that. Is this citation correct? No, what should it have in it? PAR, period, space, and then the end of that sentence goes over here, period. And then can this person just back this up and have that be their, yeah. Vivid isn't quite the right word, but they'll work that out. Okay, all right. Then what do we do to connect the next one? He also argues that, comma, move the quote up. Look, this isn't as hard as you thought, is it? God bless copy and paste. Oops. Down. Oh. Argues that, comma, quote. Now we've got to fix this, don't we? Why did I put dot, dot, dot there instead of a period or leaving it out? Because their sentence keeps going, and the person didn't include it. PAR period 7, and then our sentence ends over here, okay? And then we've got to move their analysis up and make sure it has a capital letter at the front. Keeping up the monuments up is showing, so fix your grammar, is showing African Americans they don't care. That, how about we don't care about them? We don't care. Or how about we as a country? As a country don't care and like to picture us in position. Okay, good. And then Levine even says that, even argues against the idea that they are important history. He claims, comma, quote, and then grab your quote. I told you this wouldn't be hard if you did the week's work before. If you did your week 6 work, you're in great shape right now. Back it up. He claims even empty pedestals offer, and then we got to move that period, add the PAR period in the citation, get a space between that, and then end our sentence there, and then removing the monuments is a way of showing, and then look, okay, that I don't know how many words they're combining in that contraction, but just the one. How much African Americans, probably, because Africa's issues are a little different than African American issues. All right, and now we've got the end of it. Is this a paragraph? Is this a source paragraph? Did it take me like 3 hours? No, it took me like 10 minutes, because what you do is if you use the process we used in class, read the article, pick your quotes, say what paragraph they came from, get them typed up, explain why you like them, and then build the rest of the paragraph around it. It really doesn't. How long did it take you to do the discussion board assignment last week? Not that long, right? So we're just going to do this one time this week with what you used in week 6. And then after that, and after we've checked it and practiced it, then we'll do it again 3 more times. It's not that bad, y'all, okay? Is this a long paragraph? Yes, because this person, it turned out that my example had some pretty good explanations of what they were thinking about when they chose the quote, right? That may be a place where you need to build a little bit. If your explanations of why you chose the quote were a little bit too short, you might need to build there a little bit and have some patience with that. We had to take some patience with introducing the author and the source and what the source was about in general. We had to get a topic sentence up there. But it's not rocket science, right? This is just putting pieces together, yes? Let copy paste be your friend. You can copy directly from the article. It's a digital article. That's exciting, isn't it? All right. I'm going to actually, this is recording, and we are going to create a little bank of quote integration phrases that we can use. Okay, and this is where you might want to write them down, because I'm not putting these in Blackboard, because I think you should take a few notes. It's good for you. All right, quote integration phrases, and I'm going to turn off the show codes. I don't want the codes. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger for us. Okay, you got those, and we can always use those, but sometimes it starts to get a whole lot repetitive if those are the only ones we use. What else could we say? Okay, good. The author, and you can use the name, right? So you can use the author's name, and then say says. You can also say, right, they state, right? Boy, these are boring so far. These quote integrations are an opportunity for you to use a little bit of personality. So let's see if we can get some more interesting choices there. He argues, what else? She yeah, you can, but we're trying to get away from says. We can say the author says, the article says, Levine says, but says is getting old. What else could we use? Suggest, I like that one. She suggests, what else? He clarifies, I like. Now, if he debates, that means there's a back and forth. So be careful about that. If you're saying one person debates, then the other person's going to debate back. Okay, so I'd be careful with that one. He clarifies, what else? Claims. He asserts. She, what else? Come on, let's think, let's think. Establishes, good. Huh? Would you ever say that in real life? Well, then let's not. Okay, I want us to sound like real human beings in this article or in the essay that you're writing. I don't want you to disappear behind bizarre statements like that one's a little, I'd be like, who's writing this? That doesn't sound like you. All right, she even establishes that, might be a little fancy, argues, clarifies, claims. He complains, maybe. I'm going to put one in here that's wrong. There's only one time you can say she quotes. And it's if they are quoting somebody else. If they themselves are speaking, then they are not quoting. You are. Okay? Now, she quotes Obama as saying, comma, quote, but then who's talking? Obama's talking. Okay, and that's okay if you've got somebody who's quoting somebody else, you can use that, but make sure it's clear who's talking. So she quotes Obama as saying, comma, quote, or he quotes the mayor of Birmingham as when he said, comma, quote. And that's okay. If you've got a situation like that, make that clear. Okay. You can also do the interviewer asked if he was offended by the monuments, and he answered, comma, quote. So if you've got a situation that needs some explaining, you can do it here. The interviewer asked if he was offended by the monuments, and he answered. And if you're doing that interview from NPR as one of yours, you can do that. All right. So there's a lot of ways to do it. Some of them are simple. Some of them take a little bit more. The article points out that, comma, quote. The author informs us that, comma, quote. Right, we got a lot of choices here, but they all have to be smooth lead-ins to that quote. Okay, that's why some of them have a that. The article points out, quote. Could work, but maybe you'll need a that to smooth it out a little bit. When you are listening to yourself read this aloud, you shouldn't really be able to tell where all the punctuation is. It should sound smooth, right? You shouldn't really be able to tell where the quote begins because it just smooths right in there, okay? So a nice smooth ramp every time. Everybody got a little bank of stuff to use? Hot dog. So you can use he says every time, but let's not. We've got some other choices here, okay? All right. We are in our last 15 minutes of class, which means it is time for me to take a few minutes with the students who are struggling to catch up. Let's see. I want to make sure also that I got everybody here. I have Tashara and Tallulah. I have Gavin and Cyrus and Logan and Jackson kind of made it for a minute, but never quite got here. Kamira made it. Quincy did not. Lamar and Lorian are here. Kendall is not, and Owen is here. Or Owen was here for most of it. I'm going to give it to him. All right. Are there anybody that did not hear their name called? Joshua, I got you. I didn't name you, but I got you when you came in. Sorry about that. Anybody who did not hear their name called? Okay. I'm going to have people who feel confident in what they're doing this week. You can be dismissed, and I'm going to work with anybody who is not feeling confident in their work this week or who is behind and has not taken the midterm or whatever. Okay? All right. So if you're good, you can go. If you need me, please stay. So Kimira, I think we probably need to make sure you're caught up. Anybody else? And yep, Vod, if we should definitely talk and make sure that you have a plan for getting caught up. Okay. Okay, but stay on. We've got 15 more minutes, Kimira. I know, so stay on, please. Give me a few minutes to make sure I've answered questions here and we'll get to it, okay? All right, we got 15 more minutes of class, so we're not in a rush. We're good. Okay. All right, you all set? Wonderful, good. You all set now? Fantastic, good. You all set, Lorian? Good. Joshua, you all set? Excellent, sir, good. Logan, do you need help? Lamar, are you all set? Okay. All right. So Kimira, the midterm is locked with a password right now because I need to make sure I know when you are taking it. So I need to know a specific window when you are taking it, and I will open it for just that window. Okay. And Navadni, that's the same for you. So you can either